Day one of Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media Network and PhillyVoice.com. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, and we assure you it is a coincidence. You can't really tell today. Well, you probably can. Underneath my Kangol hat, yours truly is very follically challenged. You can definitely tell that my co-host, John McMullen, is follically challenged. It is a coincidence that our first two guests, Joe Santoliquido last hour and Ed Kracz of Sports Illustrated this hour, also follically challenged. We did not do this on purpose. It just happened to work out that way. We promise you at some point here on Birds 365, we're going to get a guest who has hair. But that is not the case here. Ed Kracz of Sports Illustrated joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, Ed?
Hey, I'm great. Do I have to change my name to Matt Kracz, too?
We will not hold you to that standard. I was just discussing with John before we punched you up about the upcoming draft. John's got his mock draft. You got yours as well. With as many picks as the Birds had, they de-emphasized their draft a little by dropping back from 6 to 12. And I get your thoughts on just that move itself. But first things first, overall, the picks that the Eagles have in this upcoming draft, how well are they situated to improve the talent on this roster?
Well, 11 picks, they better get, at least half of these things right. They're going to need 3 starters, in my opinion, to come out of this group of 11. And, to be honest, guys, my head really hurt after trying to do this mock draft. 11 picks is a lot of picks, man. And toward the end, my head was starting to hurt. I felt like it was going to explode trying to find names to fit, on that third day, because I think they have 6 picks on that third day. But it's really important in the first and second and third rounds to find guys that can come in right away and contribute. This isn't a draft class where they can go find a Dallas Goedert to sit behind Zach Ertz or an Andre Dillard to sit behind Jason Peters. They need to come out with a starter day one at minimum.
Well, Ed, let's start, obviously, day one of the draft, and the Eagles fall back from 6 to 12. A clear indication quarterback is not going to be on the table. But I also mentioned with Jody before you popped on, number 37 in day 2. That's pretty important as well. I think they got to hit right away at the top of this draft. And it starts with sort of a yin and yang. If you go defense at number 12, you almost have to go offense at number 37 or vice versa. How do you see that shaking out those first 2 picks?
I would agree with you. I think you go either, like you said, offense with number 12 and then defense. Yeah, they need a cornerback. Clearly, they need someone to plug in opposite Darius Slay. So do you go first round with one of those? I haven't taken J.C. Horn, the fabulous cornerback from South Carolina, with that pick at number 12. I think, when Jody talks about them trading down from 6 to 12, I think that puts them in the position to take one of the best defenders in this class, and you have to identify who that is, because this could be a kind of an unprecedented draft where you're going to have possibly 8 offensive players taken with those first 8 picks, which, I think back in 1991, there were 6 defensive players taking with those first 6 picks. And we haven't seen any draft since where one side of the ball has dominated with those first 8, 9, 10 picks in the draft. But I think you could see it. So, if you have 8 offensive players coming off the board first, that's going to put the Eagles in position to grab at least one of the top 4 defensive players. And you could say, look, they could take Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle at 12, and then you come back in the second round and you find your cornerback. But I know I have them taking J.C. Horn in the first round. In the second round, I haven't taken an offensive player, but not a wide receiver. I haven't taken a running back, Javonte Williams from the University of North Carolina. But I think that's, John, I think you're right. That's kind of how they're looking at this, is you have to go defense, offense, or offense, defense, first 2 picks.
For both of you guys, if it's even more slanted than Ed mentioned, he thinks it's going to be the first 8. I actually think it could be the first 9. I think it could be 5 quarterbacks, both wide receivers, Penei Sewell, and the tight end, Pitts. Yeah. That's 9 deep, which means the first defensive player might not be picked till 10. So the Eagles might have darn close to the pick of the lot if Micah Parsons gets down to 12, he has been mocked for however many months from the time he decided to opt out of the season. Top 5 pick, top 7 pick, top 8 pick. If he's sitting there at 12, we know the Eagles' history. They're just not, they might be a quarterback factory. They've never been a linebacker factory. They do not pay high grade for linebacker. They've developed some linebackers over the years, but they just don't use first round picks on them. They haven't for decades. But Parsons is a special talent. I know there are some character questions about him, but I can't believe there's going to be another player that you just on skill set that you would evaluate over Micah Parsons. New coaching staff, kind of a new regime here in Philadelphia. Is there a chance that if Parsons comes all the way down to 12, the Eagles will say, yeah, we know it's been since Jerry Robinson, since we drafted a quarterback, linebacker in the first round.
It's only 1979, Jody. Only 1979.
Kind of been a while. Any chance they take Micah Parsons with their first round pick?
Yeah, I think we all had hair back in 1979. So that's how long it's been. But listen, I think that would be a terrific pick. And you hope that, maybe this new staff with Jonathan Gannon as the defensive coordinator coming from Indianapolis, where you had a tone-setting linebacker in Darius Leonard and, someone that can play off the ball like Micah Parsons can, and you can blitz, off of the edge with him because he's quick enough to get through traffic and get to the quarterback. He can cover tight ends. He can run boundary to boundary. I mean, he's a fabulous talent and, clearly one of the top 5 defensive players in this draft. But, will this be a new day for the Eagles? I would say no at this point. I don't think they go linebacker. You look at their DNA, as John likes to call it, the default setting to the DNA. John has them taking an offensive tackle with that first pick, Elijah Vera Tucker, based on the philosophy that they've had here since Andy Reid came to town back in 1999. So could they go offensive line? I don't think so, but could they go defensive line? It's not a great draft for defensive linemen. I love Christian Barmore from the University of Alabama, but I don't think they'll take him there. I would love to see him take Parsons. I think that guy's got everything you need in a defensive player, but you have to feel comfortable, again, taking a position like that for Philadelphia. And then, like you mentioned, Jody, the red flag on the character issues. You have to make sure you're 100% comfortable that those are behind him and he's fully focused on being the best player he can be.
Yeah, Ed, my concern with Parsons, and by the way, you can read Ed's mock draft and mine at si.com/NFL/Eagles. My concern with Parsons, you mentioned Jonathan Gannon, his history, Darius Leonard in Indianapolis, great 3-down linebacker. Even if you go back to when Gannon was with Mike Zimmer in Minnesota, they had Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr, great 3-down linebackers. I look at Parsons and I see an edge rusher. I don't see that well-rounded 3-down coverage linebacker, and I think that's what the new Eagles regime will be looking for at that position. But yeah, I bring up that DNA all the time. And the top half of this draft since 1999, that's a generation, Ed. That's a generation. Anytime the Eagles have picked 16 or above, it's been quarterback, defensive line, offensive line. Is there any way that changes at the end of the day? I think you hit the nail on the head. If the Eagles do anything different, it's going to be a corner. And it's going to be the J.C. Horn type player. Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley, would they be in the mix as well?
Well, they could be. I just throw Horn out there because I know Denard Wilson, the new DB coach, went to South Carolina's pro day, and he was one of the 5 coaches that were putting the South Carolina players through their drills. And he fell in love with J.C. Horn. I'm quite certain he did, and he's going to come back, and he'll probably bang the table to take him. And we'll see if Howie and his staff listen. So that's why I put Horn in there. But listen, Patrick Surtain, fantastic talent as well. both these guys have had fathers that are legacies in the NFL. Both of their fathers played years and years. Joe Horn was a terrific wide receiver. And, of course, Patrick Surtain I was a great defensive back mostly for the Miami Dolphins. So I like guys like that have that gene pool that can come in, that were raised in an NFL family. We're hoping that we see the jump in Jalen Reagor, who was also raised in the NFL family, with Monte Reagor being his father, who won a Super Bowl with the Colts. You hope that, Jalen can become the kind of receiver they envisioned when they took him over Justin Jefferson last year. And I think he will. I think Sirianni will find a way to get success from Jalen Reagor. But I love guys that have that family legacy of playing in the NFL. But yeah, Farley, the red flag is the back injury. He had the fusion surgery, not the fusion, microdiscectomy, which my son had. And, he has good days and bad days with it, even now with his core. So, I mean, that's a pretty, serious injury to look at. The backs are very finicky. You don't know what you're going to get once you get back surgery. And that, to me, with Caleb Farley, would be a big red flag that your medical staff would have to take a good hard look at. And I'm sure this week when the prospects go to Indianapolis for the medical checks, they didn't have the combine there, but they're going to have medical checks. You hope that Caleb Farley will be there and some of the Eagle personnel will be there, and they're making sure they're putting him through his paces so they're comfortable with him should Surtain and or Horn both be off the board at number 12, and that's the direction you want to go.
Let me tie a couple of things in here together with my next question, which I'm going to put to both of you guys, knowing full well there's no track record to go by. So it's kind of a speculative question more than anything else. You mentioned Jalen Reagor, and I thought it was almost comical that after the fact, in season, we heard from Harry Roseman how influential the coaches were in the Reagor selection, that their scouts really like Justin Jefferson better. But the coaches fit for our system. We just decided that Jalen Reagor might be a better fit, basically putting it off on the coaches, which I thought was very weak. We've got a new coaching staff now, without much NFL experience. Some have been in draft rooms before because they've been on staffs, but not in as prominent positions as they are now with the Eagles. Is Howie going to do this again? If they make a mistake in the draft like they did last year, and I'm with you, I still think Reagor has got room for improvement. I think he'd become a fine NFL wide receiver. I don't think he's ever going to be Jefferson, and it's going to be a comparison that the Eagles are going to have to live with forever. But I think there is upside yet still to Reagor. Are we going to have to hear this again 9, 10, 11 months down the road that, well, the scouts were leaning on, but the coaches thought this guy was a fit? How much say are the coaches going to have in this year's draft, in their first ever year in the Eagles draft room?
Well, Howie's in survival mode, isn't he? I mean, he wants to hang on to his job for as long as he can here, and he's done a good job of it, to be honest. So, listen, if he thinks he can save his job by blaming the coaches because that's what they wanted, or the scouts, then he'll probably do that. But it's hard to say how much input the staff has. We haven't had any availability with Gannon or Steichen, the offensive coordinator, yet, so we don't really know what kind of system they're going to have and what type of players they've kind of mandated they go get. But it was interesting when Sirianni talked to us, I think the first time, he said that he thinks that Howie's in charge of the personnel. When he was asked about that, he said, I think it's Howie is in charge. I think so. Maybe that kind of opens the window a crack that this new staff is going to have some sort of input, whatever that is, in telling Howie and his staff, hey, this is the kind of people we envision playing in our system. And, here's the list. And now it's your job to figure out how to order that list and when you want to take them and where you want to take them in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Ed, and the fact that that's a GM's job. But Howie has been around for a long time, and the fact that you have to be a bit of a politician. So, Jody, to your question, yeah, you got to throw the right person under the bus at the right time if you want to keep going in this league. But it was interesting because I had heard Rich Scangarello, of all people, was one of the coaches pounding the table for Jalen Reagor. And obviously he had just gotten here. So if that's the case, well, in theory, Howie might listen, and Andy Weidel, you have to throw him in as well, might listen to the new coaching staff. And by the way, they should, because you have to get players that are going to succeed in the schemes that your coaches want to run. That said, Ed, if you look, we have to read the tea leaves. So we look at Shane Steichen with the Chargers. We look at Nick Sirianni with the Colts. We look at Gannon with the Colts and the Vikings, and try to look at their schemes and see what they're going to do. How much difference do you see between what they want to do, what Doug Peterson wanted to do, and is it going to impact the draft in a drastic fashion? I don't think it can, to be honest. This team just has that talent.
Yeah, that's true. And it goes back to what Jody mentioned, at the start here, was they have 11 picks. They need to find people, they need to find talent, regardless of scheme. But, I think we'll see a change in the defensive philosophy from what we saw with Jim Schwartz. I mean, that defensive line was kind of the engine that drove this. Now you bring in a defensive coordinator in Jonathan Gannon, whose background is in the secondary in developing defensive backs. He plays more of a cover 2 type of scheme, I believe. The 2 safeties back, which gives help to your cornerbacks. You're not playing that single high, kind of leaving your cornerbacks, one-on-one a lot of the times without much help over the back, like we saw with Jim Schwartz. So, yeah, I think in that regard, we could see, them trying to find players that fit that sort of scheme. But again, we don't know. You're right. We have to kind of go and look at their history and the resumes. But, we're not sure exactly what kind of system they're going to put in place, because Nick Sirianni has been consistent that you don't marry yourself to one scheme. You have to adjust your scheme to what you have on hand. So get talent in here. Let's collect as much talent as we can with these 11 picks. With an eye toward 2022, and we have at minimum 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, possibly 3 picks in the first round. But let's just get talent in here. Let's see what we have. Let's see what they can do. And then we'll put our scheme in place once we figure out what we have on hand.
And you mentioned the gluttony of picks that the Eagles have this year into next year, with a goodly number of high picks next year. It's more than what they need. As many holes as we may think the Eagles have, they have bodies. And when you're talking about 6th and 7th round picks, you're talking about taking shots, lottery tickets, and the like. So you don't need, and they've got a lot of 6th round picks because of compensatory picks. You don't need all those guys. Do we trust Howie Roseman to be Monty Hall, to play let's make a deal, to make the key move up in the round when he's got a guy to target? They've made one big deal already, trading back from 6 down to 12. I think in comparison to what the Dolphins got from trading back 3 to 12 and then moving back up, I thought the Dolphins got a much better deal than the Eagles got for trading back. Do we think that Howie Roseman can be the guy to take the assets that he has and add value to them, monetize them better than the other teams in the league have? How much faith do we have that Howie can pull that off?
Well, they have 11 picks. Do I think they're going to take 11 players? I would be very surprised, to be honest. I think you're going to see kind of a Monty Hall on steroids, if you will. I think this guy's going to be, wheeling and dealing and hope you make the right. It's going to be very hard to follow, I think, on draft day, because he's going to be moving in and out of different rounds. And listen, he could even move this 12th pick. I mean, he could go backwards, even maybe with the Patriots at 15, or even a little further, and try to maybe get like this Notre Dame linebacker, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who had a great answer when we talked to him after his pro day about what it's like to play in Philadelphia. And I put that video on my Twitter account, and it got like 28,000 views. So, people fell in love with the kid just from that answer. But I could see Howie moving maybe even back into the top 10 if the Broncos are sitting there at 9 or the Broncos move up. I mean, I think everything's going to be in play here. And I think, can we trust him, Jody? I don't know. It's hard to put a lot of trust in Howie at this point in time based on, what he's done in these past few drafts. You mentioned Justin Jefferson and Jalen Reagor, and, he didn't take DK Metcalf. A lot of teams did not take DK Metcalf, but it's hard to put trust in him. But this is who is going to be pulling the trigger, and I think he's going to pull it a lot.
Well, Ed, first of all, I got to give you credit for getting JOK's name out. That's very impressive. That's like me throwing out the Halapula Bati Vaitai to show off to people. But well done for JOK, who's a heck of a linebacker for Notre Dame. And by the way, he's the type of three-down linebacker the Eagles need. That's a guy who can play all over the place, almost in a Malcolm Jenkins-like role, where he plays so many different positions on the back end. That's the type of linebacker the Eagles, I think, will want under Jonathan Gannon rather than Micah Parsons. But number 12 might be a little bit too early. I do want to get in the quarterbacks, though. I have to shift. Obviously, everybody loves the quarterback. So the Eagles have made it clear they're not going to take one at number 6. This is a quarterback factor. We have Jalen Hurts. We have Joe Flacco. Still need another guy. Where do the Eagles start looking for that third developmental type quarterback?
Day 3, at minimum. I think they'll draft one on day 3. What round? I'm not sure. And I think they'll probably sign one as an undrafted free agent. I think they'll bring in 2. One they'll draft and one they'll sign post-draft. I know you had them taking Sam Ehlinger from Texas in your mock draft. I had them taking Ian Book from Notre Dame, who, again, gave a great answer. I asked him after his pro day, about Joe Flacco coming in to play with a veteran and kind of an up-and-comer in Jalen Hurts, and he gave a great answer to that. So I kind of fell in love with that answer and had them taking Ian Book. But I've learned over this weekend that the Eagles have had multiple conversations with KJ Costello at Mississippi State. KJ did not talk after any pro day, but I know somebody that knows KJ pretty well. And he's told this person that he's had multiple conversations with the Eagles. So he's somebody, he started in the Stanford system, which of course we know the Eagles like that program. They like what David Shaw does out there at Stanford. They took Casey Tuhill last year. They took Zach Ertz, of course, in 2012. They've taken J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Nate Herbig is a Stanford kid. So, KJ Costello started his career at Stanford, transferred to Mississippi State last year, had 1 year in a COVID environment to get comfortable. He had this great game against LSU, 600-plus yards throwing the ball, 5 touchdowns, I think, in that game, but then kind of fell off the map from there. But he's somebody to keep an eye on, and I think he'll be still sitting there maybe in the 5th round. I'm not sure he gets to the 6th. I don't know. But I think he could be somebody that the Eagles really are targeting on day 3.
No truth to the rumor that Ed has the Eagles drafting 7 Notre Dame players out of the 11 picks that they have in their upcoming draft. Last thing for me.
Ed, though. They got a lot of talent this year, Joe.
They do.
They actually do.
Don't know.
Liam Eichenberg, the offensive tackle, he could be in play at 37 for the Eagles.
Okay, we shall see. I got no problem drafting Notre Dame guys. I just Ed noted 2 Notre Dame guys that he thought were kind of fits. That's why I felt I needed to bring it up.
Golden Domer.
Putting the draft aside for a second. You have phase 1 of NFL free agency. As soon as the first day comes, the big money comes out. Guys get picked off the board. It starts to slow. People start to call it phase 2. We've got to be well by phase 2 now. We're in phase 3, which is a phase right before the draft. There are still some guys out there who can be contributors, not starters anymore. Anyone who's good enough to start in the league or should be starting in the league has probably already been picked off. But there are still free agents sitting out there that are going to come less expensively, and picking up the right guys to fit roles and come off your bench and play special teams can be a major addition. How aggressive are the Eagles between now and the draft? A signee or 2? Jody, don't expect anything when you got 11 picks. They're not going to give anybody else any kind of a guaranteed contract, and we're still getting some guaranteed money in the deals. If we're in, quote-unquote, phase 3 of free agency, are the Eagles a player at all in it?
Well, this is when Howie did some of his best work back in 2017 when he signed Chris Long and Patrick Robinson a month after free agency began, and then
LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah, then about, I think it was the end of April when they brought Long and Robinson in. And then a couple weeks after, on May 18th, I think it was, they signed LeGarrette Blount. I mean, you don't sign those 3 guys, you don't have the Super Bowl, the Lombardi trophy's not sitting in Philadelphia. But so, yeah, Jody, I think there will be still players. I think, you have 11 picks, but, Nick Sirianni's watchword has been competition. So they're going to get somebody, I think, else in here. And I think that if you look at a position, cornerback has to be where they look. And, I think John wrote about this, that Steven Nelson is still out there, the cornerback from the Steelers, who is still available, probably looking for more money than the Eagles are willing to spend. But if the longer he sits, maybe he comes into their price range and the Eagles can swoop in. And there's another guy from the Colts, TJ Curry, I think his name is, who could be available. And Gary and Conley still out there. And look, I wrote about Rasul Douglas, the former third-round pick for the Eagles, who was cut after training camp. I think he would be better in a Jonathan Gannon type defense because of that two safety look that we expect him to use. And so, Rasul, one of the biggest knocks on him was his lack of speed. But I think if you have help for him over the top, that would make him a better player. When he went to Carolina, when he left, he had a pretty good, 12, 13 game stretch with them. So, I like Rasul Douglas. I think they should talk to him and bring him in. Not saying he's going to make the team, but you bring him in, you let him compete, and you see if you can polish that diamond up a little bit and get out of him what you saw when you made him a third-round pick back in 2017.
Yeah, and who knows, Ed, you could change the narrative too, because the Eagles have taken so many hits for missing on Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas. But the fact is, he played okay, especially early in the season with Carolina. I'm speaking with Rasul. Sidney Jones actually made some plays with the Jaguars. So it kind of tells you that different schemes can take advantage of the skill sets of different players. I like your mention of TJ Carey, who was with the Colts, cornerback. The Eagles need to add a cornerback because they can't go into the draft and say, okay, we're sitting here at 12. We're so bad, we have to take a corner. That's when you make mistakes in the draft. And I think that's what the Eagles have to do in free agency, sort of set up an insurance policy, so to speak. So if you have at least somebody who's capable, like a TJ Carey, you can do that. If, say, Rashawn Slater, a kid who everybody expects not to be there at 12, all of a sudden, if he's 12, you want to be in a position to go, you know what? I want to take that kid.
Absolutely. Agree. I think that, you can't paint yourself in a box and say, we need a corner, let's go get a corner. But I think Horn, Surtain are two corners that are first top 15 worthy type cornerbacks. They have the size, they have the speed, they have the experience, they have the bloodline. So I don't think, they would be reaching at that point for a cornerback. And it would be interesting because Slater is an offensive lineman, very good player. And that goes back to your DNA. Would they default to their DNA and bring in an offensive lineman at that point? Even though I think they are okay on the offensive line. Yeah, they're getting older. They have these veteran players, but last year when you see a guy like Jordan Mailata emerge, you see Andre Dillard still has that first-round pedigree. Don't know what he is, but we saw Nate Herbig play well enough, and we saw Jack Driscoll, the rookie pick from Auburn, come in and give them some good snaps until he got hurt. Probably getting stronger this offseason. So, I think they have some guys that they learn some things about. Now, you could always use more depth, of course, on the O-line, but, I don't think it's kind of that need type of pick that the Eagles have to make, to be honest. Maybe they get one later. Maybe they find that center, because I don't think Jason Kelsey's replacement is on this roster at this point in time. Maybe Herbig, I don't know, but there are some good centers out there. I haven't taken the Penn State center, Michael Manette, in my mock draft on day 3 in the 6th round. I mean, Jason Kelsey was a 6th round pick. So, why not we dip our toe in that water again in the 6th round and try to find, another center. And he's a zone blocking type of center that would probably fit this system well. So, I see your sentiment. I see your DNA default setting to that O-line, John. I understand it, but I just don't think they go in that direction at 12.
Notre Dame must not have a draftable center. Fed's got them taking a kid from Penn State and not the Golden Domer.
Well, I thought about the Golden Domer, but I don't think they have a center out there. I don't think Eichenberg can play center. He's a guard tackle type guy.
There you go. Ed, great stuff. I would say we're not going to lose your number, but I'll just say we're not going to lose your Zoom address, because that's how we're doing it these days. We will be punching you up again soon enough, certainly before the draft comes up again. Thanks for hopping on with us today. We'll do it again down the road.
Thanks, guys. Great. Good luck with this show you're starting up. I love it. I'll be listening.
Our pleasure. That is Ed Kracz from Sports Illustrated, Johnny Mac's cohort at SI. All right, J-Mac, coming back. We'll put a bow on the show. Keep it right here on Birds 365.
Football in Philadelphia is a lifestyle, a passion from birth, and a personal responsibility to know the game. Boo when necessary. And think about
E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles!
Every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Birds 365 was created for you. Jody Mack, the legendary sports talker, joins forces with NFL insider John McMullen. Birds 365. Start your morning with Johnny Mack and Jody Mack across the JAKIB Media Network. Watch it live on YouTube.